Are you always as prompt as this?
No.
The wife has just walked out.
The wife has just walked out, screaming, laughing, knowing how prompt I am not.
Now, we ought to get into the current stuff, then we'll get into the faxes.
Okay.
The coffee's arrived. You're
Lovely.
currently rehearsing here for a world tour. What does that mean, world tour? Where are you going, Paul?
Well, it means, you know this planet we're living on?
Yep.
Simon, the Earth, as well. That's what they call the world.
Oh.
When you tour it, they call it a world tour.
So it's going to be educational today as well.
Marvellous, I know, yeah.
How many countries are you going to? Do you know yet? Or is it one of those things that's going to grow?
Seriously, folks, we're going to Australia.
Yep.
First of all, go and see all our long-lost relatives who went there on the 10-quid trip.
You haven't played there since the 70s?
75.
75, that's
75, yeah. So we're going there. We start in Perth and then make our way over to the East Coast, Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide and all that. We're there for about 5 weeks of hopefully decent weather.
Yep.
And then we have a little bit of time off, then go to the States. Sipping my tea here, just
Is it herbal?
to prove this is live.
Is that real tea?
This is real tea, not
Thai
coffee.
food, carefully
this is
stewed.
This is the real gear, yeah.
So
I'm
you go to
getting
the
as
States?
much as I can before Australia.
Okay, you go to the States.
Then we go to the States after that, and then after that's all finished, we come back to Europe and Britain, which I hasten to say are two different places. In my mind, anyway.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Old traditionalists. Yeah, Americans always used to come over and say, well, I'm going to Europe, you know, starting in London. We say, no, you're not in Europe yet.
World exclusive.
Of course, it's changing. It's changing.
I was going to say, world exclusive splash on the papers tomorrow. Paul McCartney slams EEC. Is that true?
Yeah, Euro nonsense. Yeah, that's right. I'm not going metric, says Paul.
Let me ask you one question, actually, which is from Jacqueline Horrid, who wrote in. What current issues affect you deeply enough to speak out?
It tends to be sort of things like the NHS having a hard time.
Yep.
Because, you know, I grew up in a Britain where my mum was a nurse and was a great supporter of the NHS, and so anybody who sort of fell down in the street would be taken care of. Now it's not like that, you know, it's much tougher. You have to wait for these endless hip operations and stuff. And I feel very sad that that's happened. And for instance, our local hospital was closing, and we had to sort of fight and lead a demonstration to keep the facility open. And now, after much fundraising, I think we are going to be able to do it. But I don't know, you know, I sort of look at these situations and think, I pay a lot of tax, all the people where I live pay a lot of tax, and if we want the hospital open, should be a priority. Obviously, it's very difficult for governments to do that these days, but that's one of the things makes me sad.
You did, both you and your wife went on a march. Do you get annoyed that you've got to do that to get the publicity that's necessary for what you regard as a good cause?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't want to kind of get all down on this thing, because with the march and with the various things we've been doing, I think we are going to succeed. So, you know, all credit to the people who are helping us succeed in the government. You know, we are, I think, going to keep the hospital open, which is something. But yeah, it's a little bit annoying, you know, when you pay your taxes and you demonstrate to the people who are elected by you to go and go and manage your area, and they sort of turn around and say, no, sorry, you know, you'll have to go to the big hospital down the road, which is like about 45 minutes away. And really what galvanized me into some kind of action was the fact that a 17-year-old boy who suffered from asthma died on the way to this new facility, whereas he would have been saved if he'd have come to the local one.
Yeah.
So that's happening all over the world, you know, let alone just this country. So, yeah, as a father of four, you know, you can't help but get upset by that.
I mean, other issues, just to give you a little prod, include animal cruelty. You're very hot on that, aren't you?
Yeah. That's true. You know, Linda and I, when we got together, we found one of the big things we had in common was sort of love of nature. And, you know, she's sort of an animal lover from way back. So was I. Before the Beatles and stuff, I used to wander around, you know, in Liverpool as a kid, looking for birds and stuff. Of the feathered... Now, Simon,
sorry,
I can't say a thing, really. Anyway, and when we got together, you know, we started sort of talk about stuff like this. And then you notice... I think, how cruelly we humans treat animals generally, you know. And it starts with things like bullfighting and stuff like that. And then you start to realise there are all sorts of things in the battery farms and the pig farms. And in general. So it turned us vegetarian probably about 20 years ago.
That's what turned you vegetarian. It wasn't because you didn't like the taste of it.
No, that was all it was, really. I think a lot of people in the 60s did a bit of thinking, around about my age group, had a lot of sort of chance to think, and, it was called mind expansion or whatever. And people started thinking about things like, I'm eating leg of lamb, and out in the field there's those little lambs gambling around.
Right.
Is this necessary? And we started to ask doctors and nutritionalists, and they started to say, no, you can live on a vegetarian diet. So we've been doing that for 20 years, and without, risking becoming some vegetarian bore who every time he gets on starts talking about this, I do feel very strongly that the other species that we live on this planet with have got a lot to teach us, and that it's very ignoble of us to just look down on them and despise them like as if they're just stuff to be used and thrown away. I actually think that we've got a lot to learn from.
What do you say to people who, for example, would say we have a living to make, and the way we make a living is farming? You live in a farming area, after all.
Yeah, well, that's right, and these are the big difficult things, obviously, with issues like this. For instance, we keep sheep, and farmers will say, well, what do you do with them, when you sort of finish them? Because what they mean is that they go off to the knackers, when its working life is over, and before then, often, with spring lamb. What we do is we don't breed as many as they do. We use the wool. That's how they kind of pay for their keep. So we have, and then we make the wool into rugs and things. And they, of course, the longer you keep them, the more wool you get off them. If they go to the knackers a little earlier. So the equation just about works out. So really what I spend my time doing farming is looking for alternative ways. And the thing is, what's very interesting now is a lot of farmers are hurting because these old ways aren't working quite so well. With the EEC and all these subsidies. This is going to sound like farming news any minute. And good morning, the outlook is pretty good. Frost on the ground.
Yeah.
But, I say one thing and another. We've developed a lot of theories to answer these kind of problems. And it really looks like farmers are going to have to go towards alternatives. If you've got a wheat mountain, then don't grow wheat.
How about the people who grow wheat professionally? They're going to starve to death.
Well, no, you can grow other things. There are obviously people don't need that much wheat because there's a mountain. We got enough of that, but we grow alternative crops ourselves. And there are uses for them. I mean, it's not something I can just advise any farmer to do because I'm still working on it, and it's a difficult process. Organic farming and all this. There's lots of problems associated with it. But I think it's very interesting, and I think it's a good pointer for the future.
Is there a book coming out, the McCARTNEY Guide, eventually?
No,
is that the idea?
No, if I ever find out how to do it, as I say, I'm just experimenting. But we do occasionally come up with some good things, growing stuff. For instance, we grow stuff like evening primrose, which, until
That's
a few
the oil,
years...
isn't it?
Until a few years ago, people were saying, what? Evening what? But now women know what that is, because it treats a lot of conditions. Things like borage.
What?
Which people well, in fact, I'd never heard of it. But some people heard of it because it goes in Pim's cups. As borage. But again, it's a great herb.
Do you have rolling acres of borage at home?
Yeah, really.
What's it look like?
You can't imagine any more better-looking field.
What do you do, run through
you see these fields of linseed these days where the fields are blue?
Yeah.
And you see the oilseed rape where they're yellow?
Yeah.
Well, borage is a different colour, but the same kind of deal,
Let's get back to the tour. So many
farming
facts.
news here, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. So many facts about this from Harrison and Stanley. Please advise the dates of the UK tour. From Christine and Jim Franken, who have been fans for years. Any details of the British leg of the tour? Is Glasgow going to be on the itinerary? They saw you, by the way, at Birmingham, Glasgow and Liverpool last time and loved you.
We haven't actually got the dates for the British tour yet because, as I say, we're going to Australia, America, and then those will be finalised a bit nearer the time.
But
I can pretty much tell you, we'll be doing Glasgow because you've got to do Glasgow, We'll be doing Liverpool because you've got to do Liverpool. I mean, there's certain towns I just feel I've got to do because I love them. Mind you, Newcastle and then Cardiff, and there's a lot of others too.
Are we talking summer or autumn?
Well, summer.
Summer, okay. Yeah. You've been known to turn up at small venues. This is from Farah Marina, from Thank You, who's a nice person, obviously. You've been known to turn up at small venues. Have you any plans to do that again? Sorry, it's the Henry Court Community School.
What we did was, in between getting our new drummer, Blair, and releasing the album now, while we were recording. To keep our hands in, we did some small gigs because it wasn't possible to organise a big tour in the time. So we did little places like Southend, went down Southend and played on the pier. We went down to St Austell, which was great to get down there again, because I'd never been there for millions of years.
Well, that huge stadium down there.
No, it's just a little place on the seaside. You know, it's a little steaming seaside thing we do. And we've done a bunch of these little places, and they're great, because it takes me right back to when I first started playing in Liverpool. And I think the people enjoy it, because they're right there. It's not very expensive to get in. It's a bit of a hard ticket to get hold of, because there's a bit of a clamour for it. But we're very casual on stage. There's no big shows. We just bring a couple of lights and a couple of mics.
Yeah.
So it's a good on-stage atmosphere. And we've had some steaming little gigs like that. We brought a poet along to one of them, a friend of mine, Adrian Mitchell. And we really got back to the...
You know Adrian? That's a star act. I know his work.
He's gorgeous, yeah. But he came along, and he was lovely. We played a bit of music behind him. And he spoke some of his poetry, which is great. It was really back to the 60s, like a sort of student.
So would you like to do that again?
Yeah, I love to do that.
Is the time when you're involved in the mechanics of a huge tour?
I'm not sure, you know, probably not. Because what you've got to do on a big tour like that, if I'm singing 2 hours a night and it's to 40,000 people or something like that, it can be tiring. So I've got to actually watch, not filling my time with those little gigs, because I suddenly have got laryngitis and then there's no looking back. So I have to pace it. It's a bit like being in the Olympics. You have to sort of watch what you eat for breakfast.
We'll talk about the F word in a bit, because that's got you tied up.
Must we, Simon? On British radio,
but
must we?
I want to play Come On People from the new album. Tell me about the producer of the new album.
He's a fellow called Julian Mendelsohn, who's a great bloke. And whenever I heard his name, you know, I've heard his name on and off for years, I always imagined this very long, thin, tall, sort of blonde bloke with thin wrists and very sort of elegant bloke. Well, he isn't. He's not a very tall, and he's Australian, and he's got dark hair, and he says, "All right, mate, how you doing?" And if you get the take wrong, he sort of says, "Yeah, I don't know, it doesn't sound good." And you go, why not? He said, I don't know, it just doesn't sound good. But if you get it right, he goes, excellent, with an I. Yeah. Excellent. So, you know, he's kind of easy to work with. And he's got a very good ear. I think it's his left one. And he's smashing. We had a lot of fun. He's a crazy bloke. And he and I co-produced. And he, generally, you know, whenever he said, it didn't sound very good, we just tried to fix it.
Is Come On People excellent?
I think, yeah, actually, when we did Come On People on a Friday night, we were knocking off for the weekend off.
Yeah.
And our engineer, who's Bob Kraushaar, who normally was doing this stuff, was ill. Yeah. So Julian, who is also engineer, kind of stroke producer, got back onto the desk after many, many years and said, "Oh, I'll give it a go, you know." And he recorded this one, so this was quite quickly done and excellent. Well, we're going to...
McCartney is rehearsing at Docklands at the moment, and we're with him for the next hour, or he's with us, whichever way you like to say it. Since it's rock royalty, I guess we're with him. Paul McCartney, returning in just a couple of minutes. Bands currently that you're into, are you into Guns N' Roses, apropos Live and Let Die?
Yeah, I like the version of it. You know, obviously it's quite an honour when anyone does one of your songs, but...
You like that, do you?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you're a songwriter, you know, the fact that someone thinks enough of it to do it is an honour right there, you know.
Would duetting with Axl Rose appeal to you?
Well, I mean, he showed up originally at a gig we had in New York before the last tour, and I didn't know who he was, and he was sort of sitting there rather charismatically.
How do you sit charismatically?
You ask Axl. He knows. But he was just sitting there, and he had this great tattoo. So I was attracted by that. So I went over, wow, good tattoo, man. Then someone said he's in a group, you know, called Guns N' Roses. And after it, he said, "Oh, I really like your song." He came backstage, he said, "I really like your song, Long and Winding Road." I said, wow, you know, I wouldn't expect you to like that.
Yeah.
So then he ended up covering Live and Let Die, which is kind of a mixture between Long and Winding Road and All Hell Let Loose.
Two faxes, one from Peter Timberley and also one from Clarity Consultants. Having been born and brought up in a normal and average environment, how do you keep your feet on the ground? And to link with that, how do your children cope with you being such a well-known figure?
Especially when Simon Bates is calling you rock aristocracy. Now, how do I? No, my only answer for that is I felt very lucky the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
And in having chatted to lots of people nowadays, I find that their childhoods seem very sort of strange to me, and sort of, you know, somebody was brought up on an army base, or somebody was this and somebody was that. I think mine was a pretty normal childhood, with a lot of people around to sort of catch you if you were doing something wrong, to give you a bit of advice if you needed it. You know, sit down now, all right, love, now, come on, what's wrong? And, you know, if you had girlfriend troubles, there wasn't always an auntie who could sit you down and stuff. And I think really what's happened with me is that getting famous and getting money, I kind of tried all the other stuff, like the sort of the chauffeur with the hat and the live-in couple and all of this sort of stuff, but I hated it. I never got off on it one little bit, and I always thought...
so the wife has just brought a coffee, and let me explain that.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
She's brought more than another tea.
Come in for just one second.
in here,
What
Lynn.
sort of tea
How do
or
you
coffee
keep-
does he drink? Could you go on that microphone?
Go on
Is it herbal? It should be herbal, shouldn't it?
No, it's not herbal,
we're
it's
not.
ordinary.
We're not health freaks.
Morning,
you know.
Blair.
I thought
Morning,
you
James.
were. Can you go on that microphone just a bit? I thought that's the whole thing. You were health freaks.
No,
No.
it's health of the world freaks.
Can you explain that?
Well, it's more like sort of environmentally friendly, and that ties in with the vegetarian thing.
I think everyone, if you're a vegetarian, people sort of say, oh, you don't smoke or you don't take a drink, do you? I said, well, yeah, you know. And it's not really the health thing. The health thing was a bonus for us. Mm-hmm. Right, Lynn?
Right. And back to the tea, regular good old British tea, but not tea bags.
How are the burgers going? The veggie burgers?
Excellent.
Because you've now got a full range, haven't you? Frozen
Yeah.
stuff going out.
Really going very well.
Why did you do that? And we asked you this when it first came out, about 2 years ago, and you said at that stage you were trying to change people's eating habits. I mean, now that it's gone so successful, is that the reason, or are you making enormous amounts of money and
No, not
Buying
making a lot of
Boston.
money, and any money that's made goes back into the product. It's really to stop slaughter and help people who want to eat well
Yeah.
without eating animals, really. So many people said, oh, I'd love to go veggie, but I don't know what to eat. So I've made it easy, tasty, and it's not expensive.
Yeah, I mean, the other day, for instance, Linda got this great letter from a kid who'd been anorexic.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, you know, I never had anything to eat, and I was eating all this terrible food. My mother was worried about me. Then I discovered your stuff, and now she can eat happily and put on weight. So those are the kind of things that make it worthwhile,
All right,
you know.
that's the commercial. But while we've both got you both here, this business of bringing the kids up normally, I would have thought would be an impossibility given who you both are.
No, well, we've been very careful about that. When Linda and I both got together, she's from a family that was quite well-off American.
Yeah.
I'm from quite, medium poor British. And as I say, you know, the kind of people we've met who seem to us fun always seem to be down-to-earth people, not these big heads of state and all of this. They always seem to be stressed out.
Right.
So we tried with our kids to make a very conscious effort not to send them away to boarding schools. They've all gone through the state system, all done really pretty well, touch wood,
Yeah.
through that.
How do they manage at state school? Because they must have had a real ear bashing.
Well, they get a few people, you know. Years ago, I remember one of our kids coming back and saying, oh, the kids were coming up to them going, McCARTNey, McCARTNey, and that. But the thing is, they learn to cope with that when they're very young.
Yeah.
So they get over it. Once the kids don't last more than 2 days doing that, you know, soon the joke wears thin. And, I mean, we talk to the headmasters and teachers, and they say, well, they seem to get on very well. They seem to, you know, they've got great mates. And, you know, they just seem to do well. And I say it's a question of crossing your fingers, touching wood, and trying to bring them up in a kind of normal-ish kind of environment. You won't see many pictures of our kids in the papers,
No,
for
I noticed
instance.
that, yeah.
I mean, whereas, you know, not that I would... we just wouldn't do it with our kids. But, for instance, I think Sean Lennon has a Seiko watch ad in Japan, you know, and he's had one for quite a few years. So that's another way you can go with this. You can
Keith Richards said to me a couple of weeks ago that he was amazed how like Sean looked and
Yes.
acted. Do you find that?
Yeah, well, like John and Yoko, you know, he's...
But he said the eyes are Lennon's
well,
eyes.
he's a lovely boy and everything, you know, and I'm sure he'll be all right and stuff, but you're talking about how do you keep your feet on the ground.
yeah.
Well, I think don't give them Seiko watch ads, I
Right.
think, is the kind of direction we've taken. And try and get them through the sort of upbringing till they're about 20, 21. Then they basically make their own way, They do what they want.
Linda, can I just ask you a question? When you first got together with Paul, and at that stage everything was front page news, did you ever have a second thought about it, given the kind of publicity glare you were having at the time and possibly the difficulties later in life? And you obviously did, because you're laughing.
I'm still here. No, you say, how do you keep your kids' feet in the ground? I think it's basically what you desire, you try and pass on to your kids, so it comes naturally. We all love music. There's a lot of music in the house, a lot of fun and everything.
Right.
So I think I think people have taken life a bit funny anyway. I think we've sort of blinkered ourselves away from, we have been given the gift of life, and we all run around in sort of an industrial age now. So I think you just try and get back to basics a little bit, which is not easy.
Did you have a second thought or two when you got together?
Well, I must admit, I am sort of a person who likes wandering and having fun. So when you followed around, it did get to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
But-
did have. So I can answer that. She doesn't really want to admit it, but it was difficult, because the fans. I think at that time it was a bit more teeny bopper, and the fans sort of, I suppose, at the back of their minds were thinking they might, get off with Paul or marry Paul one of these days. So I had to kind of say to them, no, look, I've gone and got married, and you'll just have to accept this woman is now my wife. This is not a contestant anymore. This is a wife now, So you'll have to go away, There was a lot of that, and I think, it made Linda think twice, but, luckily it didn't really make any difference to our relationship. But
Is there anything that really irritates you about him?
I'm not going to
don't
tell you.
Don't start.
Okay, next thing, we've got to get back to the business of touring. You always tour now with Paul. Presumably you'll be going out in the world tour, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? I would have thought running everything, keeping everything going, and doing that must be exhausting.
Well, it is, but the thing is, we are together. What's the point? He goes off, and what do I do? Stay home and watch telly. So, we're doing it together.
Okay, let's get back to this. Paul, this is from Kevin MC. Have either George or Ringo worked with you on the new album? And there were rumours in the press a couple of weeks ago about the three of you rather, getting together again and working on a film soundtrack.
Yeah, they haven't worked on the new album. It's really just been me and the band, and bits of orchestra and stuff. But where that rumour came from was, for years people have been saying at all the press conferences I ever do or the others ever do, when are the Beatles going to get back together? And we said, well, we can't, because John's not here, and that was the Beatles. It was a four-piece, and there's no thought of it. But what happened was, recently, there are certain people in conjunction with us are making a 10-part series for television on the life of the Beatles, which gives us a good opportunity to kind of answer any points, like why did John say they were why the Beatles were bigger than Jesus? And we can explain those things instead of it just being a headline screaming,
You said 4 or 5 years ago you didn't want to do that.
Do what?
Do that sort of thing, go back and look at the whole thing in detail.
Yeah. Well, time changes things. We certainly wouldn't want to go back and try and be the Beatles again. As I say, without John, it just isn't any point. But what happens is other people start telling your story. And, I don't know if you noticed, there've been about 3 or 4 books in the last few years about me. And, I haven't read them anyway, because I figure, well, the bloke never came to see me about them, so they can't be that good, can't be that genuine. So I just don't bother reading them. But when the opportunity came up to do this series, all of us individually said, well, it might be a good chance to put a couple of the stories straight.
Right.
And as I say, time's a great healer, and we'd got back with each other and finished a lot of our business problems. So in doing this, there was talk that if there was a little bit of film, say there was a nice little bit of montage of shots of John, say, and we're all going, oh, that's lovely, oh, look at him there, wasn't it nice, like your family snapshot. Then I had the idea that it might be good if we put together, me, George and Ringo, put together a little bit of music to go with that as a kind of little tribute.
Right.
So that kicked it off. And that's really all we've said we might do. And it's only a might at the moment. But then someone at a press conference said to me, Paul, the Beatles ever reforming? And I said, well, for this little bit of music, I suppose you could say 3 of the Beatles are reforming. And, of course, this then went round the world as Beatles to reform, Beatles to reform, which is Beatles to reform in Chinese.
Roger and Teresa in Richmond, 3 questions. First of all, did Ivor Cutler inspire We Can Work It Out?
No, very good question, though. Ivor was the tour man in Magical Mystery Tour. He's the guy who was called Buster Bloodvessel. He was the original Buster Bloodvessel. And he was just, and is, a sort of quirky Scotsman who's a very nice man, who has a funny line in entertainment. Really, I used to love a song of his that was called I'm Going in a Field. And it just said, I'm going in a field, I'm going in a field, I'm going in a field, which is the note I liked. To lie down, I lie beside the grass. And it went on for hours, and I said, marvellous, Ivor, I love this song. So we just got hooked up for Magical Mystery Tour, and I don't think he did inspire We Can Work It Out.
Did you, or do you go on holiday abroad? If so, where?
Yeah, as often as possible.
Playgrounds of the rich or somewhere no one's ever
I
heard
don't
of?
know. Yeah, you know, I suppose anywhere expensive is playground of the rich. But where I love to go, where Linda had never been before we got married, so it was great for me to be able to introduce her to it, was the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you know, everyone's got to like to go there, because it is just like in the ads, you know, that beautiful blue water and the white sand and stuff. So we love to get to Jamaica if we're lucky enough to have some time and be able to do that. And we just did that New Year's for a week. And it's just an incredible island. And we met Frank Bruno on the plane going, and Dave Stewart and Siobhan. So it was great. You know, we had a really lovely time. And just to be in that water, I mean, you know.
Favourite meal?
Favourite meal? Cheese souffle. Something like that. Macaroni and cheese, Linda's quiche, any of Linda's stuff. You know, her food, that is.
Are you a gourmet, or do you just chuck it down you?
Not really. I mean, when I was younger and I'd first come down to London from Liverpool, I got into that very nice thing of sort of learning my way around menus, you know. So, this is... Because when I started, like, I ordered an avocado pear for dessert, and the waiter sort of looked at me with a sort of steely glare and said, no, sir, that's a starter. And I said, I know. Just testing, you know, just checking. I'm not that stupid. So I found my way around all those menus, and that was a lovely period. But of course, then when you become vegetarian, all this lamb en croûte and stuff, you know, doesn't mean much anymore. So in our own way, yeah, with Linda cooking, I enjoy good food. And she is quite a good cook and stuff. But I wouldn't say we're really in the gourmet line anymore. I think that was more when we went to restaurants and ordered all the French food. I think I would have been called a gourmet then.
Do you drink alcohol? And if so, what?
Yes, please.
What, wine?
What?
Wine?
What have you got?
The stacks around here.
What have you got, mate? No.
Are you a wine drinker, beer
well,
drinker?
I'm a Scotch drinker.
Scotch drinker.
As it happens, yeah. I like a bit of Scotch. And of course...
Is it the Johnny Walker Red Label, or the stuff that you get from Speyside, which has been aged for 700 years?
No, it's Red Label, actually. In fact, I don't like black, which is the posher blend. I like the Red Label. And, you know, coming through the rock and roll school of you know, enhancement, I drink Scotch and Coke. Which people say, oh, my God,
terrible.
no, how can you do it? And the Scots say, how can you do that to this fine drink? I say, easily, pour me another.
Right, and come on, people, it's just gone midday, as Rod said. Rod, there's a question you've always wanted to ask Paul McCartney.
Well, I mean, Paul has been at the top for my entire life, which, of course, is a heck of a long time.
Be careful what you say.
And I just wondered, what makes Paul go on? Because what would worry me is I'd get to the point where I think, right, that's the best I'm ever going to do. I can't top it. I'm quit now while I'm ahead. What drives you onwards, Paul?
Oh, thank you. Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm
How's
fine.
the news doing?
Overexcited by the sound of it.
Pretty slow day, actually, Paul.
No, serious question. Yeah, I asked myself that. Obviously, you get to a stage, you think, wow, you know, with the Beatles, biggest group ever and stuff, and the you know, the American top 20, we had the top 5 in it. But you don't stop when you get to those points in your life. You'd think that, you know, Sir Edmund Hillary, after he'd conquered Everest, would just stop and just sit at home and go, boy, didn't I do great? But you got to wake up the next morning and you think, now, what am I going to do today and stuff? And inevitably, my theory is that we're all trained anyway from a very young age to go to school, to go to work and do this. And it's not that easy to just give it all up, you know. So what I do is I try and do what I like, which is playing music. I still love to get on stage or in a rehearsal hall like this with the band, because the guitarist will throw a phrase at me and I go, ooh, 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 and try and respond with a bass part or whatever, you know. So it's still a thrill just to play the music and to just see audiences, because, you know, they're always changing. It's not the same bunch you saw last week. So that's what it is, really. That's the answer, is that there's always some little sort of carrot that's being dangled in front of you, even if it's an imaginary one and not a kind of, you know, a big Olympic gold medal or a gold disc in my case. It may just be that, oh, it'd be nice to get down to Australia and do, you know, haven't been there for a while, and this is a really nice band I'm playing with. It'd be great to get out with them. So that's what it is. It's just that rather than retire, because that's really what you'd be talking about if you didn't do that, you carry on and you just look for some new goals. You know, you look for a new way to do your music. For instance, I did this oratorio.
Yes.
Which was great fun to do. You know, it was really a stretch for me. And that's the kind of thing that if I'd have given up all those years ago when I'd, you know, reached, say, the pinnacle of the Beatles' success, I would have never got round to that.
Kate Graham wants to follow that one from Rod. Any dreams you'd like to see fulfilled?
For me or the world?
Well, for you. I mean,
for
the world.
me? Well,
the world
okay.
later.
The world, me first, the world later. Yeah, really, if I'm ever given a sort of wish or, you know, anything like that, it really has to me to be for the health and happiness of my family. You know, that really is sort of my big concern. I've got 4 kids and a missus, and that would be my wish, really, would just for that to work out okay. Because you know how insecure life is. You know, somebody could just have an accident and the whole thing can be thrown into a shambles. So I keep my fingers crossed for things simple like that.
You were talking about the oratorio. There was a phase you went through. It's a classic British phase where you were unfashionable and therefore everybody criticised everything that you did. You couldn't virtually open your mouth. It's about 10 years ago. When you went through that, did you lose... I mean, the press was constantly badgering you for this and for that and the other. Did you lose confidence at all?
Yes, you do, you know. Particularly in my case, where having been with the Beatles, it's a hard act to follow, you know. So you know that starting a group like Wings is like almost impossible. Right. You just think, well, what? We can't be bigger than the Beatles. So it's a question of whether you want to carry on or not. So we did, and took a lot of flack for things like having Linda on stage, because it wasn't fashionable to have a girl in the group then, you know. And since, a lot of girls have said, oh, you know, I was encouraged by you.
But it was very personal criticism, wasn't it? It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't objective criticism at all.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I think how a lot of it happens is people just... You get to a point, and this has happened recently. Linda wrote back to a guy who did a particularly scathing piece around Christmas, actually. And she was so incensed. I said, don't write back. Come on, you know, it's just it's the occupational hazard. She said, no, I'm going to write back. And the guy wrote a letter and said, look, I'm really sorry, you know, but I thought you lived in icon land. He said, I didn't think you people looked at this stuff or would be hurt. I just, you know, I think of you like just as a name, not as a real person.
So it's okay to attack someone who isn't a specific real person?
Well, it is, you know. I mean, when you think of Margaret Thatcher, I mean, you think of just a sort of, you know, everyone, you just naturally want to attack her, or Mrs. Whitehouse. You don't think of her as someone who actually goes home in the evening and has a cup of coffee. You just think, how dare she do this? And we get this about a lot of people, you know, and I think I came in for that.
They're people who set themselves up, aren't they? You don't.
Yeah.
Linda never set herself up.
Well, no, not really. But, you know, look, the thing is, when you get into show business or any kind of business like that, you have to understand that you're not going to be able to be successful all the time. So with this kind of longevity, it comes these, you know...
The highs and the lows.
The highs and lows.
Still pretty vicious stuff, wasn't it?
It was pretty vicious, yeah, but... what can you do, you know? You just have to develop a sort of strong skin and think, I'm going to be here long after they've gone.
Terry Wogan used to say, kick him on the way down as well as on the way up. Roger and Teresa in Richmond. Does Michael Jackson still own the Beatles' backlist?
Yeah, the songs that John and I wrote, when we were about 20, we did a song publishing deal, and we're basically still under that deal.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was never our company to buy and sell. And it was sold originally behind our back when we were actually with the Maharishi in Rishikesh, when we went off to study meditation there with the Beatles. When we got back, the bloke who ran it and kind of owned the company said, well, I'm sorry, but I've sold the company. He said, what? I said, well, you know. So it changed hands then it changed hands a couple more times. And Michael bought it. The joke is, of course, I advised him to get into song publishing. So,
really?
I mean, you know, a good deed never goes unpunished, you know. But, yeah, he does actually own them, yeah.
Also, from another lady whose name I can't read, any ideas of working once again with Stevie Wonder after the enormous success, 10 years ago?
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of Stevie since then, but it was great fun to work with him. Round about that time, I'd been doing a few duets. I did with Stevie, and then I did some with Michael Jackson. And one or two people, I would be on holiday, and someone would sort of say, oh, you know, I know why you're doing all those duets and stuff, Paul. You know, it's just trying to just shore up your own career. And I thought, wait a minute, you know, this is not true, because Stevie actually hadn't had a #1 till Ebony and Ivory, so it wasn't all, you know, me using him. But I thought, well, you know, it was being perceived like that. I'd better sort of knock that idea on the head for a little minute. So it's been 10 years, that minute.
From Rachel Wilson, can you remember why you didn't wear those dang shoes on the Abbey Road cover?
Well, I'll tell you exactly. It was a very hot day in London in the summer, an unusually hot day. And I lived about 2 minutes walk from the Abbey Road crossing. I've got a house there. And so it was dead easy for me to hop across and go to the sessions when we were making Abbey Road. So when we were going to, the day we were going to do the cover, I showed up in sandals, a rather fetching pair of little sandals, just because it was so hot. It was even hotter than that, so I kicked them off. Just when we were going to do the photo shoot. Well, why not? You know, I mean, other people would take their trousers off. I just opted for the sandals. And I just walked across the crossing, thinking no more of it, and just thought, well, you know, it's a record cover. It's just a silly thing I've done on a record cover. I kicked my sandals off. And Linda's got some pictures that she took at that session with me in the sandals to prove it. Anyway, what happened was a DJ in America got hold of the cover and said, wow, you know, no shoes, this is a mafia sign of death. And then they spotted a Volkswagen Beetle car in the back which said 281F was its license plate. And they said, this means Paul would have been 28 if he'd have lived. And it was all these terrible, terrible things, you know. So it was like...
So it's your fault, basically.
It was basically my fault. The guy from our office rang up and said, what do you want to do about this? You know, I said, well, I can't do a lot. You know, I said, just, I think it was Mark Twain's words. I said, tell him the rumor...